I'm Rob Driscoll, Director of Legal and Business at ECA. I am by trade a solicitor and also a qualified mediator. ECA has a business policy and practice, or legal and commercial, whichever way you want to call it, inquiry desk. So members can access us.
Hi, I'm Darren Crannis. I'm a technical manager here at the ECA. And how can the technical team add value to your business? Well, the ECA represents over 3,000 member companies here in the UK. That's approximately 27,000 operatives. And we help our members by giving them guidance and assurance to electrotechnical problems. So that could be any problems in terms of BS 7671 or any other sort of technical standard you may be installing too.
And today, Darren's going to be asking me some questions to help the members out on some of the most frequently asked issues across both of our desks.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Thanks, Rob. So a lot of our member inquiries that come in sometimes are a joint technical and joint legal answer. So the idea of this podcast really is to share those sort of common questions. And we've got our first one, Rob. So member contracts with their clients. So they're completing an electrical installation which has been designed to a previous amendment or addition to the relevant British standard. So that could be BS 7671, but it may be any electrical technical British standard. What do they complete that installation to if there's a change in the amendment or addition as they're completing the works?
So I guess this is a really good example of how we triage an inquiry. But probably worth stopping and explaining what we do. Some members may know, some members may not know. Both of us work in teams within the ECA where you can ring us up or email us with any old inquiry, and we will try always to help. There are some things that may be beyond the fringes of our expertise, but we will try and give you best answer. But by and large, with legal, it will always come back to the contract. So we will invariably ask you to send in the documents so we can have a look at them. So going back to your question, what's in the documents will determine the answer. Now, that sounds like a typical lawyer question, answer a question with a question. Do we have responsibility for the design? I'm taking it from the question that we don't. The design was carried out by somebody else to standard A, but contractually, we might be either obliged to carry out our supply and install contract to standard B or to current applicable standards. So you can see how I'm unpicking it. Really what I'm doing is looking back into the contract and saying, well, what did we agree to? Did we agree that actually at the time of completion, usually referred to as practical completion, in the case of commercial subcontracts, but it could be a consumer contract, could be a maintenance contract, we will carry out the works using reasonable skill and care, which is what you get under general law, or there might be a different set of wording, what we call a burden or duty within the contract, specified either in the terms and conditions or in the contract specification, the technical document that sits behind it, outlining our scope of works. That might then determine what standard you are completing to, and it might be standard B, the one that came later in time. The answer to this, in short, is have a look. You should be looking at these things on the way into the contract relationship. People don't like looking at paperwork in our industry. Somebody needs to take responsibility for that and just double check that if it's been designed to the first standard and in the meantime, or as the works progress, a second standard has come out, that our obligation is either to complete in accordance with the design, i.e. the first standard, or when we complete to complete in line with the current standards at completion, which would be standard 2, in which case you are taking the risk of any cost or time adjustments as a result of the changing standards. So I go my question back to you, Darren. When standards change, do they usually bring that much in terms of changes in the way you work that would bring additional time and cost consequences?
In some cases, yes. Sometimes the changes to amendments or additions can be significant. Sometimes it could be tens of thousands of pounds worth of costs to the contractor. So I guess it's really important that the contract is absolutely set in stone so you realise where your liabilities are. And most British standards will change in around about a 4 to 5 year period. So most tenders are probably what, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years before, a brick is lifted even. So it could be a whole change in the standards between what you've quoted and agreed, and 5 years later, when a new standard comes in. Another one of our questions is, member is departing from the relevant British harmonised or international standard. So they possibly have chosen a method which is not in the standard, or a product that's not got a British standard. Does this mean that the ECA assurance schemes, so the guarantee of works, does not apply?
So, number one to this question is one that kind of wrangles Darren and I frequently. Can they depart from the standards in law, regardless of the insurance schemes or any insurance issues? Yes, they are standards. They are not binding. Darren and technical team always have this banter with me over saying, well, they're wiring regs. To me, as a lawyer, regulations are secondary legislation passed by Parliament. So I don't think of them as regulations. They are a British standard. My response to it would be that you should just audit trail and lay the evidence as to why you've chosen to depart from the British standards in the first place. With the ECA Bond, which is an insurance product that ECA buys, which members can use if they input the data and download the documentation, still apply. And the Guarantee of Works, which is an assurance product supplied by ECA, it refers to relevant technical standards. It also refers to all applicable technical standards and workmanship. It is basically the ECA's promise that stands behind members that their work will meet all relevant and applicable technical standards. Can you depart from it? My answer would be yes, but you have to lay the evidence as to why you did and why the standard would not be applicable in that scenario. Otherwise, you're going to run into trouble.
From a technical point of view, departures are there providing you provide something equally that is no less safe. So it's good to hear there that if our members are choosing to depart, and we say choosing to because it is based on a good technical reason, that they have the sort of quality assurance of the ECA behind them. We got one here. Member is being led or forced into areas of work they don't usually undertake. Where do their liabilities lie?
So I'm going to duck this one slightly and say go back to your contract, check what the variation or change system says. Again, colloquially known as variations, instructions, directions, whatever other word you want to use for your client, be it main contractor, subcontractor, or end user, saying to you, oh, can you just do this as well? There are different contractual systems that will apply. Some will say at the far end of the spectrum, get on with it, you have to do it. Obviously in more articulate legal language. Others will say you only have to do it where it's reasonable. The word reasonable means you've got scope to object and say this isn't within our usual purview or remit of expertise. Sorry, we're unable to do it. I'd question whether you wouldn't also, outside the contract, already say to the client, why are you asking us to do it? We don't have this specialism. There are certain British standards applicable to this type of work that you won't be able to get from us. Our insurance might not cover it. Our PI are all risks. It's a little bit madness just to try and get the existing contract. I guess the commercial reason would be from a client perspective, you're there, you're on site, can't you just pick up your screwdrivers and do it anyway? That age-old misunderstanding of what your field of expertise is. But do you have to do it? The answer comes down to, well, what's in your contract? What's your scope for objection? And even if you don't have a contractual right to object, there are commercial levers where you can say to the clients, this would be uncommercial and uninsured risk if you proceed to try and force us to carry out this type of additional work. which wasn't in our original scope of works?
A very, very common question we get actually to our technical helpline is withholding an electrical certificate or a report because the member thinks their client won't pay. Now, is that allowed?
Can be. Have you got a clause allowing you to? Is my answer. Very short, sharp answer. It's one of the most frequently asked questions. If I contract with you to carry out works, which includes supplying documentation, certificates, or anything else, and you don't, that is an element of what you promised to deliver that you have failed to deliver. So withholding it is a breach of contract. If you have a clause in your contract saying you'll pay for this in stages, milestones, whatever way you want to describe that, and when we get to a certain point, if you haven't paid me everything I'm owed, I can withhold the following documentation. You could list it. Then you do have the right. You've given yourself the express contractual right to withhold the documentation listed in the clause pending payment. It's good contractual sense from a contractor's side to have something in there that does allow you to withhold completion documents pending having been paid everything you're owed so far. But sadly, the amount of times we get that call, can I withhold the documents? They haven't paid me everything I think I'm owed. Do you have a clause? No. Then no, because you're in breach. Why would I pay? If I was the client, why would I pay you if you won't hand the documents over? No proof you will. So it kind of works both ways. I think the right thing to do, and I'm not here to preach morals, is probably to just agree an amount. Agree a suitable amount that's paid enough for the contractor to hand over the documents and suitable comfort enough for the client to say, all right, I can't withhold everything you're owed, but I can withhold this much just to make sure you hand everything over.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Another question we got from members is a member has been subcontracted or is subcontracting. What are their responsibilities and liabilities, both to their client and the subcontractor?
Okay, let's get this quite clear. You draw this out on a diagram. You are responsible to your client for everything you have contracted for in your scope of works, regardless of what you might have outsourced, subcontracted, or sublet to others. So you might, particularly in a tier 2 subcontractor who's taken M&E for the main contractor. I mean, on average, M&E accounts for 40% of the cost of any construction job. So it's quite common that tier 2, particularly larger ones, take the whole thing, subdivide it into different trades, sometimes mechanical separate to electrical, and then outsource one or other. And then you quite often get subdivisions of electrical, subdivisions of mechanical. It really doesn't matter. Even if you've used a self-employed labour-only subcontractor or a self-employed sub-consultant to design, remember that regardless of what you've given them to do, you still have responsibility to your client. Nothing obfuscates that. So what you've got to make sure you do is in your subcontract with your suppliers, try and back down the risk so that they take the same risk you're taking under your contract with your client.
To extend on that, how does that affect the ECA assurance scheme, so warranty and bonds, when you're going through that subcontracting process?
You're covered for the work the bond will cover you for, because it has a limit on exposure, etc., to the extent of the package you've taken responsibility for. So it doesn't matter that you might have subbed it out. Okay, insurers may, of any kind, insurers may step in if they have the right under the product, what they call subrogation rights, where they can step into your shoes and sue the party who actually did the work on your behalf to recover it from them or their insurers. But primarily, they will pay out. So it should matter that you've subbed it out.
Okay, thank you. And that leads really nicely on to, again, chatting about the ECA assurance schemes, so the guarantee of works and the bond. So those products in general, where do they apply and where don't they apply?
Okay, currently, the ECA Guarantee of Works, let's define it as best I can. It applies to works carried out broadly across the UK, Channel Islands, etc. But um, we don't operate in Scotland. We do cover members within England and Wales and Northern Ireland. The work it covers is that which where the contract value is between £250 and 50,000 for the generation transmission of electrotechnical, so electricity. Just giving broad brush idea of what the guarantee is at this stage. It's mostly going to be consumer projects, but not exclusively, because it will cover common parts in some commercial buildings. But as inflation moves up, whilst that 50 grand cap is there, it will continue to stay, if you like, low value. It covers the works being compliant with relevant technical standards for a period of 6 years after completion. It is automatic. Nobody has to register documents for it at present. That may change, as most warranties are now registrable. So watch this space as to where the ECA evolves in that direction. But it allows your customers who have contracted with members to carry out works falling within that price bracket, basically, to know that you are backed. That the work you do, if you failed to exist or wouldn't come back and fix it, because if it doesn't comply with technical standards, ECA would step in and help. Bond, totally separate product. It's an insurance product that ECA buys on its members' behalf. So they can log on through their ECA account, go straight into the Markel Insurers portal, input their data around the client, the project, the value. It will use their declared turnover to ECA to calculate a multiplier of what the bond value cap will be. It's mostly applicable to commercial work, so it's got a higher value cap or contract value scope to apply, and it will cover two risks. The first is the same as the guarantee, i.e., for 6 years after completion, that work is compliant with all relevant technical standards. But the second most interesting one is that it will actually go slightly further, and it will cover the risk of the contractor going bust before they've finished the work. Now, given that the bond is free, that's an incredibly valuable tool. It does only cover electrotechnical work, so it can't be extended, it can't be adjusted. You can't ask Markel to change the scope of it because it's a volume-based product we buy at the start of the year for all ECA members. So that can be a little bit of a grumble from some who would like to tailor it to their projects or their client requirements. But where clients can ask for performance bonds, which is a different product, but equally covers the risk of contractor insolvency before completion. And the clients know that if they ask for that, the contractor has to go out into the market and ask an insurer or a bank for a cost to price that product. And they'd have to pass it back to the client. Ours is free. So actually, if the client's really after covering the risk of you going bust before you finished, why not try the ECA bond? Because it's probably a much more cost-effective option. It's not quite an identical product, but it will work for the insolvency risk.
So in terms of performance bonds, which a lot of sort of contractors or clients are asking for, the quality assurance, ECA assurance products, so the bond will suffice and meet that in most cases, and it's free for our members.
Yeah, but many main contractors, in my experience, have either seriously considered or accepted the ECA bond in lieu of a performance bond. And that's why I think it's been incredibly powerful to have both the bond and the guarantee as a value statement which stands behind the credibility of the fact that our members have passed through technical requirements for excellence in what they do before they'll be accepted as members of the ECA. It also matters, I can tell you from the political work we do with government, there is always a kind of put the pen down moment and say, sorry, seriously? ECA promises that its members' work will comply. Yep. And how? Because our technical checks are robust and we want our members to mean excellence.
In terms of the bond, what's the sort of limits on that? So is it up to the contract value?
No, we take their turnover and declare it. So it really depends on them being honest and prudent with us when they declare their electrotechnical turnover. And there's an algorithm that is up to Markel to determine what it will cover, but it's based on what they declare to us.
And for the member's client, once they've got that bond in place, because obviously they get a copy of the certificate, so the member will give them that. If anything does happen, that project's completed, is it up to a certain value? Is it to a registered value, or is it until the project's
There's an
done?
overall cap on liability of 100,000 to any one client in any 1 year, I believe. Like all insurance products, there will be capped values. If the bond or the guarantee, there were repeated claims on it in 1 year, neither ECA nor the insurer behind the bond, Markel, could live with open-ended exposure. So that's perfectly reasonable. I think the important bit to note, which I probably should stress, the guarantee applies automatically to people's works. Currently, the bond has to be registered online to apply. It won't automatically apply. So members do need to go through the portal on our website to make sure that works.
Do you think members use this enough? Because on feedback I get from members, they say that their clients really value the bond because it gives them extra assurance, and also their shareholders, their stakeholders, their directors. Because often in a business, the person who wants the work's being completed may not be the person paying the bills, and they have to go and satisfy the directors that this M&E project they want is of high value, and they'll be looking at risks. So often they say that that bond helps them win business over other contractors. Would you agree with that?
I would, for two reasons. In the last 2 years, insolvencies have shot up across construction. It has caused major concerns amongst clients. Cynical me might say, we'll stop doing business with people that are likely to go bust. But what if you're in a growth period? What if actually you're trying to grow the business, take on slightly bigger contracts, and therefore people just want some security in place? If you're a client's lawyer, your three methods of security usually are try and get parent company guarantee. There may not be a parent company. Try and get retentions. Well, we know they don't work and they're constantly abused. Or thirdly, can I get a performance bond? So why do you want a performance bond? Well, I want to make sure that if they go bust halfway through the job, I've got money to finish it, or money to reduce the pain of the losses I might incur of them going bust along the way. Well, hang on a minute. You can get me a bond through ECA that is free when an open market performance bond might cost me tens of thousands of pounds. That also covers the insolvency risk. That's a huge value offering.